Hello everyone, welcome back to the SHR Modding YouTube channel for another tutorial video. And today we're going to be taking a look at another aspect of honing your attention to detail. And as I mentioned in the previous video, we're going to break down and analyze the Porsche 911 RSR. I did forget to mention in my initial video that this tutorial series is going to be very thorough. It's going to start off with these basic things, these basic core principles, and hopefully build upon those principles later on when we get into the software side of things and making samples and arranging samples. All of this is kind of a prerequisite to that because there's a lot of fine details in the software side of things, which if you don't, generally a person who doesn't pay attention to those types of details, and if you're generally a person who's not very pedantic about those types of details, then it'll be quite hard for you to grasp a lot of the things we'll cover in the future episodes with regards to software and audio samples. So these first few videos are a way of introducing somebody to being pedantic, basically, because being pedantic and being somebody who wants to get the absolute best result that they can is part of any successful venture, whether it be sound modding, whether it be creating other things, video animations, anything, CAD designs, anything. You need to be pedantic. You need to have a keen eye for detail. You need to notice certain things. You need to be able to notice and pick up on certain things, learn from them, that kind of thing. So this beginning of the tutorials, these first few tutorials are going to be very, in a sense, basic, but also quite foundational in that respect, that when I talk about certain things in the future episodes, I want people to understand what I mean, because I want people to have grasped what kind of, how fine of a look I'm taking at the software and the editing side of things. So this episode is going to be analyzing the Porsche 911 RSR and the things that I pick up on when I listen to car sounds. And because I've listened to the RSR a lot, and because a lot of people have liked the RSR as a car, as a sound, as an engine, as a flat six, it's a very well received car in a sense, in terms of its sound. Then I thought that this is the best car probably to analyze, as a lot of people will probably already be familiar with it, and it's very interesting in and of itself because of the different sounds that the car produces that the car produced at different times of its life, and still continues to this day to be changed and adapted and updated. Then this is a very interesting starting point for us to have a look at, to analyze these sounds. And again, I'm going to be very specific, and I'm going to be very pedantic, and I'm going to be picky. And also I should make a mention of the fact that the whole reason why I got into sound modding in the first place was because of this car. In essence, it was because of the update that Porsche did to the exhaust system of this car that made it sound so good, and that's the sound that many people then really liked. And I saw a gap, I saw a place that I could fit a sound mod within the community. I saw a gap, and I saw that nobody had made a sound for this car yet that mimicked the new exhaust sound. And I originally actually really liked this car, and my first sound mod ever was based upon the original exhaust sound actually. And then the update to that, I decided that I will definitely focus on the new exhaust rather than sticking with the old one, because I figured that that would be something, because of how good the car sounded, that would be something that would be in demand, and thankfully I was right with that decision. But yeah, so what I was saying about being pedantic is that the reason why I put so much time and effort into this car is because I really like the car. I really like driving it. I really like listening to it. I would genuinely sit down after work or uni or college or what I was doing at that time, and I would just listen to this car driving, and I would watch YouTube videos, onboard videos. I'd watch external shots. I would just really like looking for videos for this car to try and get sounds off, to try and get samples off. And that's something that you need to have, because if you don't like the car, the sound of the car, you don't enjoy looking for content and materials and videos, then this isn't something that's gonna fuel a good experience in terms of the final product that you make. Because if the more you like something, the more motivated you are to do it, the more motivated you are to polish it, to make it sound just the way it should, to put time and effort into the little details, the more you're willing to do that. And if you don't like listening to the car, if you don't like watching the car, if you find it a burden to look for videos or any audio material for a specific car, because that's the thing that takes the most time. The samples probably take an hour or two maximum, three maybe if it's hard. If it's a hard file to get samples from, maybe an hour or two for the internals and the same for the externals. But the majority of the time is taken up by actually looking for material to record from, to collect samples from, to record samples from and edit. And that, if you can't do that, if you struggle to do that, then it's going to be a very hard time for you to put that effort in. It's going to be very hard for you to put that effort in, put that motivation in. There's not going to be no motivation there. So the whole reason why I was so willing to keep up with the updates to this car, to the sound of this car, and to keep updating, it was version 0.0.1, and then it went to 0.1, then 0.2, 0.3, 0.4. I think I skipped to version 0.5, and then 0.7, 0.8, 0.9. Now we're on 1.5.1 with this car. And the reason for that is purely because I really enjoyed listening to the car, and I really enjoyed looking for more footage, more videos. Really enjoyed just, I'd record a whole section of audio, and then I'd just sit there and listen to it, and I'd be like, oh, I need to make samples from it now. I'd procrastinate just by listening to the car. And the same goes for other cars that I made, like the Audi R8, GT3, the Lamborghini Huracan, that kind of, those kinds of cars also. You have to genuinely enjoy to do something to make it something that you put your effort into. Otherwise, you won't put as much effort into it. So with that said, we'll move on to the main part of the video. So we have to remember what kind of engine we're looking at here. We're looking at a flat six engine, which is a 6-cylinder engine. So we're going to be looking at the multiple of 3 engines. And we know, meaning one of those types of engines, and we know that what kind of sound, from the previous video that I did, we know what kind of sound that should have as a generic bass note. So what we're going to notice here is, I'm just going to play certain parts of these clips, and I'm going to tell you exactly the things that I notice, and I'm going to try to put what I notice into words, which is not that easy. Because I'm describing a sound to you, and different people might interpret different descriptions in different ways, but hopefully some of what I'm trying to convey comes across. It'd be a lot easier if I could put this into audio software and isolate some of the noises, but I'm not 100% sure on how to do that, because I'm not very skilled on audio spectrum editing at the moment. But anyway, let's get on with the clips, and let's tell you exactly the things that I notice, or the main things that I take away from a sound when I listen to them. Okay, let's play this first video. So this is the 911 RSR in its original configuration. This is with the dual split exhaust at the rear of the car in 2000 and really early 2017, late 2016, early 2017 configuration. This is the configuration that ran in Daytona. of 2017. Let's have a listen. Okay, so initial impressions. The first thing that I noticed straight away is that the car is quite quiet because it gets easily drowned out by other cars that are going past on the main straight, and you can't hear it until there. Just before he steps on the throttle, you can just hear it up to there, which is very close to the camera. And that part of that's due to the car on the start finish straight drowning out the noise from this car. The second thing I notice is the squeak that happens in the low rev range when he's accelerating. That squeak. And when he bobs over the bump, because there's a bump on the exit of the pit lane at Monza, and anybody who's played Assetto Corsa or Competizione with the laser scan tracks, and possibly even iRacing as well, I'm not sure, I'm not invested in iRacing, knows that there is a bump at the exit of the pit lane. And you hear that when he goes over this bump, he dips back into that rev range where the squeak occurs. So you hear the squeak fade out, and then when he jumps back into that rev range over the bump, it'll come back in and fade out again. So it'll go beep beep like twice. It'll squeak twice. Have a listen. So you have a long squeak and then a tiny blip at the end where he jumps back into that rev range. Now that tells you a lot about the sound of that squeak. That it happens on throttle, it happens at a certain rev range, that when the car dips back into that rev range it happens again, and it seems like it's not something that is initiated just by being in a rev range, and like a long sound that's initiated by being at a certain rev range. It seems like this sound occurs over a range of revs, like say for example 3000 to 4000, I don't know exactly, but let's just say for example 3000 to 4000, this sound happens. And when you accelerate through that rev range, when you decelerate through it, nothing happens. When you accelerate through that rev range, that sound occurs. That's what it seems like from my initial impression. This is the kind of detail that you need to understand all types of sound with. This is the kind of pedanticism, detail, what you can call it, kind of what you want, that you need to be looking for in a sound, because this is what you want to recreate in the simulator or whatever game you're developing for. Of course, we're going to use Assetto Corsa because that's what I'm most skillful at. But you can apply this kind of knowledge to whatever sim you develop for. So let's continue. Okay, two observations here. First of all, you have a nice low classic flat six humming sound. No high pitch noise here, no screaming noise, just a low, smooth hum. And that's the nature of the engine note on this car. Second thing you notice is the pops on the upshift. The car pops. Let's have a listen again. So you have a bit of a vibration in the engine and the transmission there when he shifts, but that's probably maybe because of longer gear ratios. And the next one pops. Yeah. So the further away the car is, I presume, from this initial impression, you'd get pop, and the closer the car is, you get less of a pop, but still, relatively distinct upshift sound, bang, possibly not bang, but a distinct upshift sound where the engine stops for a moment for let's say 200 milliseconds or half a second. I'm not sure with half a second, probably too much, probably 200 mils, and it instantly the ignition starts again, or the throttle's pushed back in again. Obviously the driver doesn't do this, it's all electronically controlled, but you hear that vibration, that catch as well, where it catches the next gear. If you say I'm trying to translate audio into words, and it's quite hard to do that, but if you listen, it's not really a pop, but it's a nice upshift sound, and you can tell that the nature of the engine note changes, even though the pitch is the same. The type of sound changes just at the upshift, and then goes back into that nice deep hum of a sound. Let's continue. Hear the pop again. And again. So in that clip here, let's have a listen again. in that clip, the car's producing like a trumpet noise, where the sound sounds like it's coming out of a bell shape exhaust, which it isn't, but it sounds like that. And this is quite prominent with this car. You'll hear that in a lot of other shots as well. Another pop. Another pop. Okay, two things here. Number one, brake squeal. Now, so you hear the brake squeal. And number two, when it's on throttle accelerating towards you at high speed, you hear, I think it's the transmission, but it might just be wind. I think it's the transmission. Have a listen. You hear the whistle, the high-pitched whistle. It sounds like wind going through a duct, like a wind going through a duct. So you get that. No, that's not the right sound. There, it starts to decrease. That's not the correct sound, but that's the kind of pitch decrease that occurs when the car slows down. And you can't hear it at all when the brake squeal starts to occur. So it's like another word to describe it would be a hiss. So that's something else that I notice. So I would try to make sure that the samples that I make for the car coming towards the camera includes that in the engine note. Downshift sounds are nice. Nice chirpy downshift sounds. Nothing much there. Transmission noise at the lower RPM that you hear. Nice upshift sound. Pop. Another pop. Not really much different to what we heard before, except that you can really hear the treble in this, where the exhaust, you can hear the air coming out of the exhaust, the shh, like the treble noise, the bit that takes up the treble bandwidth in the EQ range. There, so you hear the hiss, the zzz, alongside the and the further away the car gets, the less you can hear that. Yeah, so that's something that's very common with pretty much all types of cars which are powerful and loud. You hear that kind of hiss sound as they go past. My initial descriptions probably won't be very accurate, and then I'll try to correct what I say to try and make it more clear, just because I've never really tried to describe audio before and it's quite hard to do, to be honest. Again, if I could isolate the noises, that would be a lot more helpful for somebody who doesn't understand what I mean. So I think that's pretty much where we will end this particular. You hear a nice rasp off throttle, and that's pretty much it, to be honest. Nothing extreme, nothing screaminess, no screaminess, no deep rasps or anything, just a normal rasp, and just a normal, clean, well-behaved sound, let's say. And now we're going to go on to the exhaust update for the 2017 RSR, which they installed at Le Mans. And this is the one that got me into sound modelling. And, well, no, that's incorrect. This is the one that got me into sound modelling for Assetto Corsa. I have done some sound modelling before for Grand Prix 3 by Jeff Crammond, one of the best simulators of the era and even today. Grand Prix 4 also, I tried to get into that, but I was more into Assetto Corsa at that time already, so I didn't really spend much time on Grand Prix 4 sound editing, sound modelling. But Grand Prix 3, I made some V6 turbo sounds for the Ferrari, Renault and the Merc in around 2014, quite a long time ago now. So anyway, we move on to this this iteration of the RSR, and let's see what we notice. Okay, immediately, initial impression, the car is very loud. I'm not telling you that because it's loud in my ear, in my headphones. It's not that. It's loud. I can tell you it's loud because of the echo that it's creating around the track. So if you listen, it's not even at full revs. It's at pit lane speed limit, and you can already hear an echo when it's this far away, and that tells you that the car is very loud. That's all. Sounds obviously. It sounds different to the previous car, but how different we don't really know until it accelerates off. Obviously, we're assuming now that nobody's listened to this car and we're listening to it for the first time. We're assuming that with all of these cars, because most of the time, you will when you listen in this amount of detail, you will be listening to a lot of things for the first time. You'll be noticing a lot more things for the first time, and so that's how we're looking at these cars too. This car and the iterations of it as well too. Yeah. Okay, so initial impressions, really loud, and it doesn't have a low smooth. It has smooth, but not a low and deep engine note. It has a very high pitch and screaming engine note. And the second, although it's the same pitch, it's exactly the same pitch. Let's prove that to you. Okay. Oops. So it's exactly the same pitch. It's the same engine note. Why is it not playing these videos? Okay. So the funny thing is that sounded like it continued on from the previous video. It was the right note, but just a different sound, a screaming sound instead of a deep humming sound. So yeah, that's the initial impression, that the sound is changed, but the pitch is the same, and because it's just a different exhaust, not a different engine, that makes complete sense. The next thing to note is that the squeak sound in the low rev range is still there, but because the car is now so loud, it's much less prominent than before. Did you hear it? Catch it again if you didn't hear it. Yeah, so the squeaky noise is still there, although much less prominent than before. I'm just going to play this shot because I really like this shot. Okay, multiple things to notice from here. Number one, so much echo on the approach. How many RSRs are there? 1. How many does it sound like? 15. Because the car is so loud that it's producing so much echo when it's this far away, coming towards us. And the exhaust, don't forget, are still at the back of the car. So, yeah, really loud echoes. And combined with that screaming nature of this sound, this exhaust, sounds really nice. When it comes towards us, here, so you can hear much more of the actual car and less of the echo when it comes towards us, and that's obviously natural. But before, like when the car's really far away, you can just hear the echo. You can hear the car as well, but it's a lot more muted than when it comes closer. Yeah, so you hear the car, the actual car a lot, the direct sound of the car a lot more, and the echo obviously less, comparatively speaking. When it goes past us, you get a microphone piercing sound, an ear piercing sound, probably in real life, and that is something that I would like to recreate in the game. And that is the piercing sound that occurs at this, it's like an abrasive piercing sound, even though the sound of the car is a screaming sound. When it goes past the microphone, it's a very abrasive and very violent sound that probably maxes out the mic. And it maxes out pretty much every single mic I've heard this car recorded with. So, for that purpose, I think that it would be very nice to recreate that in a simulator. And by the way, if you want to, you can write all these things down that you notice. It's very helpful to write things down. So, yeah, when it goes past that streaming sound. And for the record, I took a sample from all of these stages. I took a sample from when the car's far away, here. I took a sample when the car's coming closer, here. And I took a sample when the car goes past. That, where the car just goes past and continues down, just before it brakes, that is actually a sample that I used in the real car, and this is where I got it from. So, that's why, well, that's one of the reasons why the car in game has that piercing sound when it goes past you, is because that sample is from this video. And there is a way to make that sample play every single time the car goes past you. And obviously when we get into Fmod, we'll get into more of these detailed aspects of the sounds of the cars as samples. Then we'll get into more of the sample editing rather than the actual the actual creating or the actual listening for good places to create samples from. So we're going to continue. The last thing to notice is the downshifts and the pops on the downshift in this new exhausted car, and a much more exaggerated rasp. Now, you have to listen to a multitude of recordings of the car. You can't just listen to one and base your sound off one recording, because that's not accurate. Sometimes you'll hear sounds from the car that aren't natural. Sometimes you hear sounds from the car that are just a result of what mic was used, or where the recording was positioned, where the person who's recording was positioned. You'll hear a lot of things that are not common with the car, but occurring in certain footage or certain audio recordings. And so that's why you need to listen to a multitude of recordings of the car to understand what the general sound of the car is, generally speaking, because that's what you want to create. You don't want to create something that's specific to a certain scenario or specific to a certain track or location, and then put it in a car, and then it's going to sound off when it's not in that location or that environment, or when the car's not doing that thing. For example, sometimes cars are running in different engine modes, so they have different settings on engine timings, and that changes the sound of the car, for example, and fuel burn settings, that kind of thing. And sometimes you'll hear a car will sound a lot more rasp, have a lot more rasp on the downshift and the off throttle sounds, and then sometimes you hear it'll be quite clean, and that can be sometimes due to running in different engine modes at different tracks, or multiple things. And I did this once, that I recorded in, this is with the RSR mod, I think it was my 1.0, 1.1 or 1.0, I think, and I recorded a really heavy bassy sound in the car, because that's what I heard in one of the recordings. And then a lot of people liked it, but I realized then that actually this is not what the car sounds like all the time. This only happens in certain circumstances, and I learnt that I should really focus on what the car just generally sounds like most of the time, so that you get the generally most accurate recording rather than the specifically accurate the generally most accurate sounding sound, rather than the specifically accurate sound. And that's what I wanted to, so this is the thing that led me to speak about that, is these pops on the downshift. This one. Now this is the only recording that I've heard these pops on the downshift. It doesn't happen on most recordings. Of course, this could be the excellence of the mic that's used. It could be a weakness of the mic that's used. We don't know. Well, I don't know because I've never seen this car in real life, in person. And most of the people who drive this car in the sim also haven't seen it in real life. So if you've been to see this car in real life, that's an advantage. You'll know exactly what it sounds like, and if this is accurate or not. And yeah, so that's another disadvantage of being very specific with the recordings that you pick and choose. You want to be a bit more general. And I know in the last video I said about trying to find the aggressive sounds of the car, and while that's true, only if those aggressive sounds are constant. So you'll hear that the car is really aggressive when it's close to the camera and not so aggressive when it's far away. So you want to capture that aggressiveness when it's close, and you want to capture that fall off in aggressiveness when it's far away. You want to capture that. That's what my point was in the last video. So I'm just going to forward to a few more clips of this car and let's notice some other things. Again, okay, so these pops I've noticed on quite a few videos. So these pops on the downshift, you should include things like that. Echo, again, you can hear the echo. So you hear that when he gets on the throttle, you get the vibration of the whole transmission and the engine, and it actually sounds really nice that when he gets on the throttle. And then listen for the squeak. Nice long squeak. And again, you might recognize that from driving my car, my sound, sorry, of the RSR. That is another place here. That is a sample that I recorded from this video. Again, piercing sound through the microphone. Nice upshift sound. Again, another sample that I recorded, and that's where you hear that sound in my mod, because this is where I recorded it from. Let's have a listen. Not much to notice there, just a high amount of echo. And let's see the downshifts on this one. So you see, you didn't hear those pops this time. You just heard a scraping, like an abrasive sound on the downshift, but not a pop, like the first footage that we saw in this video. Piercing sounds again. Yeah. Nice, clean, soft upshift. And I think that's pretty much. Oh yeah, the last thing I have to mention about this car is when the car goes into the pits, have a listen to what happens to the sound. What happened there? Let's have a listen again. Now, of course, remember, the engine still sounds like this, if we presume. But the exhaust is the thing that makes it into a screamer, we presume, because we don't really know. And so here, what I think is happening is, at the low revs, you have less influence of the exhaust sound, because the car's overall quieter, and the actual engine sound that's coming from the actual moving parts of the engine, I think you can hear that more. And so you get a mixture of the high note, which is a screaming note at this low rev range, and the low smooth note from the previous sound, I presume. Again, I'm not sure for 100%, but that's what I presume is happening here. Okay, and that's the end of this footage. Now we move on to the side exhaust for the 2020 911 RSR update. And this is in some ways going back to the first sound. In some ways, the engine note very similar, but the note, as in what I mean is the pitch, but the actual sound is different. Let's have a listen. Oh, didn't mean to do that. Let's have a listen. So instantly you hear a lot more echo. Like the Screamer exhaust, you hear a lot of echo. Tells you it's a loud car. Okay, first impression from the as a difference from the original sound, because these are the same engine notes, we're going to compare these. These are the low, deep engine notes rather than the screaming. We're going to compare these two. Yeah. First thing to notice is there's no rasp on the downshifts, and the off throttle sounds no rasps. It sounds a lot like the Ford GTE. That's another thing to notice. If you've listened to a lot of cars, GTE cars, GT3 cars, sports cars, cup cars, formula cars, then you'll have a general idea of what sounds like what. To me, this sounds like the Ford GTE. And the reason for that is it has this trumpet effect. Trumpet effect, kinda. I think this one might. Oh no. Google always decides to remap the keys to whatever you're using. There. So that trumpet noise, that there. So you get that, but in this you multiply it by 10. So you get that really bell-shaped exhaust kind of noise from this car all the time, not just at certain rev ranges, not just certain points around the track, all the time. Yeah, again. Okay, so this sound is a lot simpler in a sense. It doesn't have any rasp. It just has the upshift throttle kicks and the downshift throttle kicks and the upshift pops, and that's it. No rasp, no character mid range. In the mid revs, no dual notes. Like in the other RSR, the Screamer one, we had dual engine notes. I.e., we had the main note being overlapped with the secondary note, which you can really hear, which we'll discuss secondary notes in a different video, but here, yeah, you hear both notes at the same time. None of that in this new side exhaust. It's just one single note, one sound all the time, no rasp, no nothing. And in that sense, it's a very simple sound to make. So you see how, again, it's piercing to the microphone, but in a trumpet kind of way rather than a screaming kind of way. And that's the main takeaway from this sound. There's not much else to talk about because it's all exactly the same. And finally, the last one is the latest update to the Porsche 911 RSR, which was done for 2020 as well. Or perhaps it's for next year, but it's been testing this year. And let's have a listen to this. Okay, initial impressions. This car is very quiet, and it sounds like the Screamer RSR. We know that because of the engine note. We know it's quiet, not because of how it sounds in our earphones, but because the transmission now we can hear, which is a lot louder. You can hear, look. And the squeak, really loud. We can really tell the squeak apart from the rest of the sound. Remember, back in the 2017 updated RSR, you can hardly hear the squeak. Yeah. In the 2020 the 2021, let's call it 2021 RSR. Hear the squeak. We hear it really loud. Yeah. You can hear loads of transmission and hardly any engine noise. So now we hear it actually revving up for the first time, and we hear that it's not piercing the microphone and it's not producing as much of an echo around its surroundings, just like the GT3R. And this car sounds a lot more like the GT3R from the outside. Well, it sounds like the RSR, but as quiet as the GT3R is. It sounds like the 2017 Le Mans RSR, but it's as quiet as the GT3R is. This is how I notice. This is what I notice. Nice pops on the upshift. And again. Can you hear that car coming towards you? Barely. You can barely hear that coming towards you, just like the GT3R. And this is something that I am pretty much the only person that I see implementing this in a sim. You can't really hear a car when it's coming towards you as much as when it's going away from you, and this is a testament to that. You can't really hear this at all until it goes past you. And I only see myself really doing this with the GT3 cars, mainly because they're the quieter ones. I try to adjust the volume curve so that you can hear it, but quietly, and then it comes closer, and the closer it comes, the louder it gets. And then it goes to normal volume as it goes past, and then it stays at normal volume. And I haven't seen many other sound creators implement this in any game, in any games, any of the mods even. They don't do this, and this is, again, attention to detail. If people don't notice, they won't implement it. And this is something to notice, because it happens with every single car, pretty much, that's quiet. Like, quiet, obviously, relatively speaking. So we're talking GT3s, GT4s, we're talking this RSR now as well. And even like LMP cars, even Formula 1 cars now. That's how they sound. To an extent, again, they're louder. I think they're a bit louder than your average prototype or whatever. But yeah, something that I think that more sound creators should implement. And then you hear it go past. So again, can you hear it? Not really. Could you hear this one? Undoubtedly. Okay. Can't hear anything, can't hear anything. Okay. Did you hear that? That whistle that goes down in pitch? If you're listening on headphones, it happens in your right channel. There. Just before he gets on the throttle. That sounds like the transmission to me. And because this car's so quiet, you can hear it. Yeah. When he gets on the throttle, a wealth of sound. It's still not as loud as before in the other RSR. And you get more of the squeaky noise because the engine's not as loud. But still, the on throttle is quite a lot louder than the off throttle when the car's coming towards you. Something to note. Now that is a nice sound. That upshift sound, that is actually probably what the other RSR sounded like as well. But because it was so loud, it was clipping the heck out of the mic, to be honest. I think that's what's happening. Still clipping. So it seems like it's too loud for the mic, and this is probably what that sounded like in real life. Yeah, which is still a really nice sound. Sounds really nice. Still, again, sounds very similar, but one's clipping the mic, one isn't. So for this one, I would record that as an upshift and a rev sound. Again, we'll discuss recording samples later, but these are things to pick up on and notice. Let's have a listen when it's coming towards us at high speed. So let's have a listen again. So you notice a quiet echo, and you can hear the car in and of itself slightly, but not nearly as much as the old RSR. Downshift. Pretty much the same as before, although you've got a bit more of a deeper rasp now on this one. Again, look at a variety of clips of the downshift to make a judgment. Transmission. You still hear the transmission even when the car's accelerating, which is astonishing. Transmission again. Some slight clipping on the mic there. Ooh, here we go. Nice upshift, downshift sounds there. See how loud that transmission is on the rear of the car, and obviously it's at the rear, so that makes sense. But that is a nice sample, a nice few samples of the downshift sound with the good bass that you get. By the way, if you're listening to these, try to listen on good quality earphones or speakers or headphones, because there's a lot of things that you capture with good quality headphones, good quality drivers, or even multiple driver earphones or headphones, because there's a lot of good, there's a big range of sounds, big range of EQ in car sounds that you might not hear on lower quality hardware. So it's a really nice collection of downshift samples there for us to use. Again, the low rasp. Pop on the upshift. See that deep downshift sound that you got there? That's something that I would try to mimic. Nice pop. Again, pop on the downshift. When the car's coming towards you, you get more of a transmission in this car. So you hear the squeak just tentatively kicking in there. I don't think he was low enough in the rev range to make it do its full squeakiness, but just listen here. There, just caught it slightly. And yeah, so this one is much of the same. Let's have a look if there is any footage of it going into the pits. No. I wanted to see if it sounded like the old Screamer RSR while going to the pits, but there's no footage in this video. So that wraps up the video viewing session. I know it's been quite long, but the idea here is to have an understanding of what kind of things to notice in a car sound on a general basis, and that's why I compared all of the sounds of the RSR rather than just one, because there's a good range of sounds here, and it's the same car. So we're looking at the same track, same car, so that means the same engine note, same kind of gearing, same upshift, same downshift kind of configuration, hopefully. And that is something that is obviously you can't find that anywhere else unless you look at a different type of car which has been upgraded like this has. I don't think there is any others, but yeah, so that is the detail in what kind of things to look out for in a sound, and what kind of details that you would like to copy over, let's say, to the in-game sound. So I think we'll call it quits for today, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.